You're listening to the InfatuAsian podcast, which is a show where I talk to and about Asian creators. I'm Curtis, and on today's Side Dish episode, we'll be talking with Sophia Hotung, who is an author and artist of the Hong Konger Anthology. All right, welcome back, everyone. I hope you had a great holiday weekend. We're back here at the end of the year with a surprise edition. I told you a couple weeks ago that would be our last episode, but I guess I lied because we're coming back with another one. And today's a super fun one because we are joined all the way from Hong Kong by Sophia Hotung. Welcome, Sophia.
Hey, hi, Curtis. Hello, everybody.
So nice to have you here. How's your holiday season going?
Honestly, the past 2 years, I've just been at home with my mother because our whole family is not in Hong Kong. No one's, people are quarantining 21 days if you come from the US or the UK. It's 7 days in a government literal ship container and then 2 weeks in a hotel. No one's here. It's very quiet. But you know what? It's great. There's no pressure. I didn't do any presents this year. It was just eat a lot of food and watch TV.
Yeah, that 3 weeks sounds pretty miserable.
It ain't great. It's a real way for Hong Kong to isolate itself, both with the virus and with everything else.
They basically said stay away.
Yeah.
Unless you really, really, really have to be in Hong Kong, you're not going to be coming to Hong Kong.
You're not getting in.
Yeah. So, you've heard the voice of Sophia Hotung, and she's written a book called the Hong Konger Anthology, which we'll get into in a second. But I like to do this with people, especially people overseas. So I like to imagine a world without Omicron or coronavirus, and we're all healthy and happy. And so let's say we were doing this interview live in person in Hong Kong. Where would be a good place? Now, forget about background noise. We'll find a way to deal with the background noise. But where could we go to have a little chat about your book in Hong Kong right now?
Okay, so what I used to really like to do is go to beaches in Hong Kong. So I was thinking, okay, we could do go to a beach and eat there, which is something I used to do a lot as a kid. But then I was like, that's really sandy and messy and the equipment would get ruined. So then I was like, okay, what cafes are there? What stuff's there? And I actually have something called celiac disease, which is really, really annoying. But basically, I'm one of those people who's like, I can't eat gluten. And I don't do it because I'm annoying. I do it because it would literally kill me. Not that you're annoying if you don't eat gluten because you don't have celiac. But I was like, I have celiac disease. So I was like, right, that narrows down a lot of my options. But there is a cafe I found in Sheung Wan, which is the hipster part of Hong Kong, called Dandy's Organic Cafe. And literally everything there is gluten-free to the point you feel like you're in LA. And I've never really found that in Hong Kong. So we'd go there because then I wouldn't be focused on this meal could kill me. Yeah. And I'd be more focused and you'd enjoy it because it's actually good food. So Dandy's.
Nice. Yeah, I love talking to locals because we always get the inside story. So I was going to take you somewhere, but I don't think I can take you there now that I know that.
No, am I going to die?
Probably, but there's a little place, I'll give you the idea of it. In San Francisco, there's this little place called Cafe Bakery, very generic name. But it reminds me of Hong Kong because it is, now my Cantonese is terrible, but it's like Gong Sik Sai Chan, which is what we kind of call Hong Kong style Western food. And it's kind of has the pork chop, the baked pork chops, which would kill you probably.
Which would kill me, but I'd have a great time dying.
Yeah, okay, so this will be your last meal ever.
What a sort of scoop for you. We're going on a podcast, we're learning about her, but we'll also kill her at the end.
Yeah,
it's a 2-for-1.
My bad.
Sacrifice. Anyway, I appreciate the effort. But that happens a lot though. People will be like, let's meet here, and then I'm like, ew, and I go and I'm like, you eat this.
I'll have water.
Yeah.
But I like it because it's kind of the original Asian fusion, right? Hong Kong cuisine is kind of like the original Asian fusion where it's, just the Portuguese influence in Macau and then the English and the Dutch and all these different influences. It's like all these international trade cities are fun like that. Yeah.
You think of Hong Kong style milk tea, it's basically, we have to drink British people's version of tea. It sucks. Let's sort of make it our own.
Yeah.
And then they Hong Kong style Western food is always fun because they'll a recent thing I've noticed is they put cheese on everything now. Well,
Yeah,
I mean,
yeah.
I do too. I'm like trying to distance myself, but I do it. But you'll have like cheese milkshakes now. Cheese is the new thing
Right,
to go
right.
on like Korean barbecue, to go on milkshakes, to go on like pancakes. Everything's got cheese as a thing. And it's because it's Euro, but it's not. And
Yeah,
yeah.
yeah.
Same with the people. We're all like confused and mixed and just don't really know what we are. And we're sometimes too white or sometimes too Asian, but we're just like, we'll go with it.
But that's what's great about Hong Kong, though. I think
Yeah.
it's such a mix of both cultures. All right, so we're talking to Sophia because she's in Hong Kong and has long roots in Hong Kong, and so she's written her. This is your first book,
It was
right?
my first book. Yeah.
Yeah. So she's written her first book, and it's called the Hong Konger Anthology, and it's available now. I got mine off of Amazon. It got here like in 3 days, so you can get your own copy here in America in less than a week, and it's a great coffee table book. It's a good conversation starter because I have some relatives from Hong Kong, so we had some
No.
conversations about it. And so I think we were trying to trace how I found this, but I think it's from a podcast that I had heard you on, and then Instagram, and I knew I wanted to talk about it because it's such a fun, kind of whimsical book. And so people can find you at sophiahotung.com. Is that
Yeah,
correct?
basically like type my name into a thing and my handle's pretty much the same throughout.
Yeah.
So Instagram, Sophia Hotung, Facebook, Sophia Hotung, website, Sophia Hotung. Like you'll find it there. I sort of send the book internationally through Amazon and like local Hong Kong bookstores. But if you order it from me, I write something in it and send it to you.
Oh
So you
man.
can reach me quite easily. I'm not like that hard to find. Yeah.
Yeah. So you all should do that if you're interested in this. And let's talk about you a little bit, just to know where you're coming from. So for folks in Hong Kong or familiar with Hong Kong, you probably recognize the name Hotang because it's on libraries and schools, and they might have seen it on a park somewhere. And I guess it comes from your great grandfather.
Yeah. Like it's weird because he's had like a lot of kids, and those kids have had a lot of kids. So there are actually loads of people related to him. But because of, men getting the last name, I've just
Yeah.
happened to be like the first daughter in a line of men who've carried the name down.
And
So
it sounds Chinese,
it
but
sounds Chinese. So here's the thing. Well, actually, it's not meant to sound Chinese. So that didn't work. Basically, who he was like, think 1910s, late 19th century. He's this guy who's born from like a Dutch trader who was in Hong Kong, and like a Chinese woman who was just sort of around. I called her on one podcast. I thought she was a prostitute, and afterwards I got yelled at by my mum because she was like, "She's not a prostitute. What are you doing?" And I was like, "Oh my god!" So I don't want to say I don't know what she was. Her occupation's not important. She wasn't defined by her work, but she's my lovely great grandmother, great grandmother. And anyway, she's Chinese. This guy she creates a child with is Dutch. He's mixed, and at that point in time, being mixed was incredibly frowned upon. It was seen as like dirty. This Dutch guy also had like a proper family who wasn't that. So a lot of his illegitimate children were in Hong Kong being mixed and trying to find a way to navigate being mixed, but also being related to quite a profitable merchant. And my great granddad, who was called, his last name was Ho, because when he was born, they were like, well, what do we call him? He's a bastard son. We should just call him Ho because the dad's from Holland.
Oh, really?
So they were like, yeah, literally. So they're like, sure, Ho's a common name. So his last name's Ho, and his first name, his Chinese name, is Kai Tung. And so he was like, I'll just get rid of the Kai. We'll bung the Ho and the Tung together. And it sounds like Austrian or Germany, because like Achtung is a German word.
Yeah.
And like Tung is a very like Germanic sound.
Yeah.
So it was like, it's close enough that people won't like question it. They did. But so basically he was wandering around with and he gives himself an English name, which is Robert. So to white people, he's Robert Hotung, maybe Austrian, looks a little bit not white, but we won't go into that. And then to like his, Chinese friends, he's Ho Kai Tung. And so he manages to navigate this very interesting racial dynamic where he's not allowed to live in certain places, but then because he's white passing enough, is able to like get a house on the Peak where white people normally live.
Yeah.
He's not allowed in the Hong Kong club because he's not white, but then he starts the China club and right next door, and everyone's like, oh, well, hang on. So he's able to do this sort of stuff, and his job is working for Jardine Matheson, which is like a trading company in Hong Kong, which is huge at the time. So he gets rich through that. And from there, he's just sort of used his money, like to build roads and things guys like to do. They like to see their names on things. So they built a road, sponsored a dorm, and has had many children in the process. And I just happen to be like a very distant descendant with the name, so people pick up on it.
Yeah, it's fascinating. Yeah. My name's kind of similar. I have, my last name is Chin, which would be Chun in Cantonese or Mandarin. But, when my ancestors came over here, they just kind of said, well, we'll go with your dialect, which would be Toisan dialect. So they called it Chin. But then they added an extra N to it. So it's Chin with two N's, just because I think there were too many chins with one N.
They needed to be unique.
They wanted my ancestors. So anyway, Chin with two N's. And then when I was in college, I found out that it's actually an English name, Chin with two N's. And there's a coat of arms. There's a coat of arms and everything. Yes.
Oh my God, you're a lord.
I could be
entitled to a piece of land or something.
But I met some guy in college. I was like, hey, the teacher was taking attendance or whatever, and our names were right next to each other. Like, it's totally Caucasian guy. I'm like, how did you get the last name Chin? He's like, it's an English name, and I had no clue. And if you look it up, if you Google Chin family on Google, you'll see a bunch of English folks or people from Virginia and.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah. So.
You've been like taken away when you were a baby from your true family.
Well, so we went the other way. We had a Chinese name that became an English name. So, I don't know. Well, what are you going to do, right?
No one's who they say they are is the end of that story.
At the end of the story, we're all kind of mixed. Yeah. So you were born in Hong Kong?
I wasn't. So where I'm born is quite political because I was born in 1994. So Hong Kong went back or became a special administrative region to China. So it wasn't a colony to Britain in 1997.
Right.
So you can imagine like a heavily pregnant woman, like my mom being like, okay, we don't know what's going to happen in 1997. Could be totally fine. Could be like a bit scary. We don't know. And she's born in Hong Kong and my dad's born in Hong Kong. So if I were to be born in Hong Kong, I just have one citizenship.
Yeah.
So they were sort of hedging their bets with me and my sister. And they took us to the UK literally a month before we were meant to come out. And just so we could get passports, which has been helpful in some ways because like I've worked in the UK now and didn't need a visa. But it's a strategy that a lot of people in Hong Kong use. Like there's a lot of talk right now about the British National Overseas Passport that was given to people before the handover. So Hong Kong people are British citizens, but not the same tier. Like passport politics in Hong Kong is interesting. And I'm a case study in that 90s kid thing where I'm like, Hong Kongers sort of rate their citizenship on how many stars on their Hong Kong ID have. And you get 3 stars if you have Chinese blood, and it's like the most stars you can get. So I have a 3-star ID, but I don't have a passport, and I wasn't born here, which some people are like, then you're not from Hong Kong. It doesn't matter, I don't care. But yeah, so I'm like indicative of that era where parents, especially mixed parents, were like, where do we position our children with citizenship so that they are as safe as possible and have the most potential. So,
and so you spent your childhood kind of, you went to school in England or here in Hong Kong?
Yes. So like my dad's sort of Hong Kong American Irish. My mum's Hong Kong, or like Shanghainese, but her parent migrated to Hong Kong, British. And my mum was like, okay, our kids are growing up in Hong Kong. That's great. But I feel like they need to have some sort of British heritage. So when I was 11, I went to boarding school in the UK and hated it. And good for me, I actually got really sick when I was 16 while at boarding school. I got like an autoimmune disease called autoimmune hepatitis. And that ended up being so bad, I had to come back to Hong Kong. So I actually like came back to Hong Kong at 16. I didn't go to school for like a year and didn't know if I'd go back to school. I was like, I'll just be a waif and a stray. I'm like so sick, I don't care. I ended up going back to high school when I was 18 and did my last 2 years of high school in Hong Kong. And then I went to college in America. So in the end, I did my mom and dad proud. I'm an international woman.
That's fascinating. And so college in New York, were you a reader of the New Yorker when you were in New York? Or
honestly, I feel like I should say I was because it's like a better story. Not really. No, I was like in college. I worked at a newspaper. I worked at my college newspaper for 4 years and was really into journalism. And I was aware of the New Yorker just because it's around and like
Sure.
people talk about it, but I never really read it. And I didn't start this project. So just for context, the project is basically I take New Yorker magazine covers and I change elements about them, but keep something similar so you can see a parallel. But I make my version about Hong Kong. So if there's one with like a black cat in it, I've got a white sort of little mini poodle because everyone has that dog. So that's the sort of thing I do. And it would be a great story if it was like she read the New Yorker her whole life. But literally this started as a joke. Like I find it very difficult to wrap my head around this year because in March I literally as a joke thought I'm going to make a meme of this New Yorker cover for Hong Kong and show it to my friends and we'll have a laugh about it and then we'll all forget it happened. And it's blown up into a thing that I wasn't expecting because I never like went out to be an artist. Like I can get into like the context of why I started it.
Sure.
But basically I like graduated college in New York where I didn't read the New Yorker. And then I like became an auditor and I moved to Scotland just because I thought I'll go to a new city. Moved to Scotland, was an auditor at KPMG for a very brief time because I got really sick. And I knew I was sick already because I have autoimmune hepatitis, but I was like, this is weird. This isn't the same. But I was like, well, I know what's wrong. So I'm just doing something wrong. I know what's wrong with me. I'm like dieting weird, or maybe I'm like not exercising enough. So I try and like carb load and I try and like exercise and I try and get up early and like be really efficient. And I just made myself sicker and sicker to the point where I'd start a job, get sick, go to hospital, come out, be like, and then like start another job. And it got to the point where I was in hospital for a month in London where I'd moved down to. And my mum was like, you need to come home. You need to stop working. We need to like figure out what's wrong with you. And along that line, I found out I had celiac disease, which was like getting worse and worse the more I tried to carb load and the more I tried to like, it was just, I was like, I know what'll fix this, bread. It's like, no, bread's killing you. So, and I'd lost so much weight. It literally looked like I was a skeleton with skin pulled over me. It was terrible. Anyway, so I was really sick, came back to Hong Kong. In Hong Kong, worked a little bit in tech, which was what I was used to, but I just wouldn't stop working because I was so ashamed of like being, at that point I was 25, like a 25-year-old who didn't work, who lived at home. So I was like, must go to job. I got really sick. And then in like October 2020 was so sick, like just completely ran myself into the ground that I couldn't walk anymore. I was in this bed right here before your very eyes. I literally couldn't get out of bed. And I didn't know what to do. I was really depressed. And I was one of those like classic Hong Kong kids that had equated my value to my work. Sure. Like a lot of Hong Kong kids, if you don't get a certificate for something at the end of it, if you don't get a trophy, if you're not like ranked top of the class, then like don't even talk to me. And I was like a smart enough kid that I was used to doing well. Yeah. So when the only thing that like I could base my personality on was gone, I had one of those like, who am I moments, but much sadder and much more depressing. So I'm in that phase. I'm like, oh my God, I live at home. I don't have a job. My LinkedIn's a mess. Like, what do I tell? Like, I've had 5 months at this job, 5 months at that job. Like, it's awful. Yeah. What do I do for the rest of my life? And I'm sick and can't work anyway, no matter how hard I push myself. So, and at that point, Christmas comes around. And this is Christmas, not like 3 days ago, the Christmas like last year. Yeah. And my mom's like, I don't know what to get you. You have everything and you're sad. But here's an iPad because you don't have that. And I was like, oh, that's actually cool and nice. And I had some friends who were who had downloaded this app on their iPads called Procreate to draw stuff. Yeah. I was like, I'll do that. That looks fun. And I started out drawing on the iPad because I'd lost a lot of my muscles from just being in bed all the time. And I found it hard to text. I found it hard to like trace without shaking. So it started as me doing like tracing exercises. I'd literally take a photo, put it on the Procreate app and then trace it. And then I was like, I can draw stuff actually. So I started drawing people and tracing people. And then I wanted to draw stuff that I didn't have pictures for. So I was like, right, now I need to learn how to draw. And so in January and February, I was like watching the insurrection on TV and just the whole time like drawing and watching like CNN coverage. Mm-hmm. And so I was sort of in this weird zone where I didn't want to, it was good TV on. I know it was like serious, but it was like good TV I didn't want to stop watching. I was just drawing absentmindedly, teaching myself. And in the end was like, I actually have something here. So I put like a picture I drew up on Instagram and I hadn't posted on Instagram in so long. I was like really depressed, didn't want people to know what I was doing.
Uh-huh.
But I said, oh, I draw now, like lol, okay. And people were like, you draw? Because like people didn't ever know me as someone who drew. When I worked at my college paper, I was an editor. So I was in charge of like text. And we had a design team that would come in and draw like covers and stuff or images for the text we wrote. And sometimes if we were in a rush, I'd try and make something and it would look awful. And the design editor actually had to be like, Sophia, you need to stop and you need to tell us what you need because this looks bad and you're making us look bad. I was like, Ugh. So in fact, the design editor messaged me. It was like, when did you learn to draw? Like, why couldn't you do this earlier? So I was like, oh, it's a pandemic hobby because everyone was like baking bread and learning how to knit and stuff. But yeah, so I was like, okay, well, I can draw now and I'm posting it and people like it. So I made like pictures of things. I drew like travel posters. I made like a meme. And then I thought, oh, I'll make another meme. I'll do a Hong Kong version of a New Yorker. And I posted that. And it got a weird reception, like way bigger than anything I'd done before. So I was like, okay, well, I need to learn how to draw anyway. I like the idea of dipping into the New Yorkers because it's not just one artist. Like if I learn from New Yorkers, I'll learn from a lot of different artists that are easy to find. Yeah. And there's something funny and charming about the stories in each cover. So I thought this will be fun. I'll do a few and we'll see where it goes. And so I kept doing them. And I noticed that while I was doing them, it was helping me reflect on a lot of stuff, on like being sick. And like being sick and young is weird because usually people think disabled people are old or like we're in a horrible accident. Right. And so when you're sick because you worked too hard or like you don't really know why you're sick, people are like, you're not really sick. So it was a way for me to like process disability, process like, I don't know, my Eurasian identity, process sort of the pandemic, process like a lot of stuff I think speaks to Hong Kong, but also speaks to my generation. And by doing that, I think I just hit a chord or struck a chord with people. And not everyone liked every single one, but I was doing so many so prolifically because I didn't have anything else to do that people would stick around because one that they liked would come up at some point. And after that, I post them and write essays. Like I'd write a little essay in the Instagram description, but there's a word limit and it would cap out. So I was like, okay, I need to find a way to tell these stories without like having to cut myself off from sharing specific things because of the word count. So I thought I could make a book. And I've always wanted, like when I was a kid, I always wanted to be a writer, but I put that aside because I didn't think it'd be profitable. And it's not really, but whatever. The art fund, selling my art funds the book. I'll just say it like that. But I was like, okay, I have nothing to lose. If I like make a book and publish it on Amazon, print on demand, I don't actually have any costs to it. I'll just do it and put it out there and see what happens. And over time, the book's like changed shape. It was going to be a series of interviews for a while that had its own issues. And in the end, it's become a book where there are 70 of the prints I've done, a little sort of story about what goes into them. And then I've also written poems for each of them, which is weird because I'm not a poet, I'm not a poet and no one reads poems. Like unless you're like an English major at a women's college, you're not going to read the poems. And before anyone gets mad, I was an English major at a women's college, so I can say that. But like my mom was like, no one's going to read your goddamn book of poems. And I was like, that's okay. They'll buy it for the art and I'll have the poems for myself. And it's true. Like when I talk about it now, people will be like, I got your book last month and da 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 da. And I'm like, yeah, what did you think of the poems? Oh, there are poems. Oh my God, look at the other side of the page. But yeah, anyways, so because of what's happened, people were like, oh, do you sell these? Do you do exhibitions? And so I've kind of been dragged into this art world that I really had no interest in, which sounds super like privileged and stuff because other people work for years to like do this.
That's how it works sometimes, you know?
Yeah, I'm super like rattled by it because this time last year, I was literally like a bed potato and I never wanted to be an artist. I wanted to be an author, but I sort of let that dream go. And so to like put on an exhibition, to like launch a book, to have people invite me on podcasts is absolutely bizarre for me. Yeah. But at the same time, I'm like having a great time. So
sometimes that's just how it works. You know, sometimes you got to luck into stuff sometimes.
Exactly. But one thing that I like, it's weird because a lot of people, so with most artists, they like go out to be artists and they want to focus on the art. And usually people will approach them and be like, can I manage stuff for you? But what's weird with me is I'm actually really bad at art. I'm like still not great. I can only draw on an iPad because a lot of it is understanding the tech, but I'm like good at corporate stuff because that's where I was trained, where I cut my teeth. So it's a weird, I noticed that I'm a lot more strategic sometimes and a lot more corporate about where the art goes. And I have to draw it back. I have to be like, there doesn't need to be a business plan for this. There doesn't need to be, you don't need to make this a project like you would when you had a job. You can just let it happen. And I've had to pull myself back from the edge every now and then to be like, the art's not good anymore because you're trying to make it a thing and you need to think more like an artist. And it's a weird like double brain I have now where there's very type A, like Hong Kong kid pre-sick me who's like, we must profit like stonks. And then there's also like the part of me that's sick and doesn't want to do any of that stuff anymore and is trying to reject that. And it's an interesting balance that I think works. But every now and then I have to like check myself and bring myself back.
Yeah, I think I read that on your Instagram just recently that, you know, it started out as kind of therapy and fun and just an expression, and then, you know, then it became popular, and then, you know, then you're trying to think about how can I make this, but you might lose some of the joy out of it.
Exactly. I found that through doing like commission work, which is like good work, but if you're not behind what you're doing for a commission, and if you don't want to do it, it becomes a job and you stop being creative. And when people need a logo and your brain's like, you're like, not sorry, I shouldn't make faces on a podcast, no one knows what I've done, I made a frown. but it really, it's like, it's self-defeating. If you're not in it to enjoy it, you're not going to be useful to anyone.
Right.
And it's a difficult, like, I don't think advice ever is that helpful because it's not going to apply to everything. But in a creative industry, I think you need to prioritize liking what you're doing first. Otherwise, you're going to stop being creative and then everything's going to dry up.
Yeah.
So, word of wisdom.
So do you have a it's a weekly, the New Yorker is a weekly publication, and it's been going on for 100 years. So there are a lot of covers out there. How do you find these covers? Are you just leafing through them and thinking out loud like, oh, this could be a Hong Kong scene?
Yeah. So what I normally do is what I started doing is I would go on Pinterest because there are like Pinterest boards that people create of like them sorted by decades. Okay. And so I'll either go on like Pinterest and just scroll. And Pinterest, like the algorithm it uses, just lets you see similar ones. So if I like one, but it's not quite right, I'll click on it and it'll show me similar ones. So I'll usually scroll through Pinterest, save stuff. And then when I have like a folder of like covers, I'll go through and think, okay, I want to do that one. And it's going to be this now. I'm changing like kids painting Easter eggs to my cousins and my sister and me like playing mahjong around a table. So I'll change that. And I'll go to the New Yorker website where they're all like cataloged.
Yeah.
And I just download like a copy of it. I use it as a reference photo. And then I literally have it side by side with my Procreate app and start drawing. Sometimes I do it the other way around. Instead of looking at New Yorker covers, I'll think, okay, I want to do a cover about this. And the one I did that was the hardest was I wanted to do a cover for domestic helpers because there's such an integral foundation to Hong Kong and are often invisible, not given a lot of rights. And I thought there was a cover that had to be done for that if I was going to do a cover of Hong Kongers, but it had to be done right. Like it's very easy to minimize it or trivialize it or make it like do a sort of fake sort of fetishization of like a cleaning lady. Like I just didn't want to make it disrespectful, make it look like I was trying to profit off like that situation, especially not being Filipino at all. So I was thinking like, what can I do? And there are a lot of New Yorker covers with a character who's a French maid. And I was like, that's not right. I shouldn't do like the staff shown in New Yorker covers in like the 1940s. That doesn't look right. And it's not accurate. And then I was like, well, Filipino helpers or like helpers in general, they're not just Filipino, are often maternal. They often take on the role of a mother. And a lot of women in Hong Kong can only work, including my mum, because they have support at home to take care of their children.
Right.
And so I was like, okay, I'll look at mother covers. So I was like New Yorker mother covers, like scrolling through, but it still wasn't getting it. And I thought it would still be a bit too trivial or just not quite right. And it would look like a white girl trying to make a domestic helper cover. So I sat on it for a really long time, and by accident just happened upon a picture from like the 1940s during World War II of a munitions factory. Like you can see in the background they're bullets or something. And it's lunch break at the munitions factory, and there's a pod of men and a pod of women, and one man is looking over at the pod of women. And the pods and the way they're sitting reminded me of how domestic helpers will sit on Sundays in like walkways and parks. And I thought, that's it, that's the one. And weirdly, it's come from World War II, but the structure of the groups is what I noticed. So I changed it. Now they're both pods of women, and they're eating like Jollibee, which is a very like popular chain here. They're in like Causeway Bay, which is honestly, Causeway Bay has more, there are different alcoves where domestic helpers go. And they're kind of culturally segregated just because you gravitate towards other people from your country or from. Causeway Bay is, I think, one of the more mixed places on the island. There are a lot of places in Kowloon, but on the island, there's a lot of Indonesians that go to Causeway Bay, a lot of Filipino ladies. So more men and women mixed and stuff like that. So I thought that's a good location. There's an iconic bridge that goes like in a circle. It's pink and yellow and colorful. So I thought it would be fun to juxtapose a very bright and colorful sort of scene with like nail polish and people on their phones chatting, having fun, Jollibee. But there's a real sad truth, which is that they have to spend Sunday away from their families, away from, like, especially now in the pandemic, they've gone years without seeing their families. It's very difficult to go to and from the Philippines from Hong Kong or Indonesia or any of these countries where they will normally emigrate from. And so I think I don't want to be like, I did a great job, but I think I'm very glad I waited for the cover to come to me rather than try and force a cover.
Forcing it in there. Yeah. Now, it seems like some of your work is autobiographical a little bit. Like you'll have Eurasian girl sits at a banquet table.
Yeah, exactly.
Or you'll have I think it was your ballet school. Little girls on the sidewalk. Is that a big part of what you kind of, not a big part, but it seems like a good number of the covers are autobiographical?
Yeah, I mean, I think that goes back to, it won't be authentic if it's not coming from a place of like familiarity. And I do make some pieces that I'm totally unfamiliar with, and I try to interview for that. So I worked with a friend to help me interview like a street cleaning custodian and did a piece on her called Water Break. And it's not actually that popular. People don't like it, maybe because the art's bad, but I think it's because it lacks some sort of connection, because I'm super privileged and have never been a street cleaner. So I recognize my view as very, very narrow, and it's privileged, and it's white passing, and it's female, and it's educated, and there are so many other types of Hong Kongers who aren't those things. But at the same time, I think about like I mean, I'm not comparing myself to other like great artists, but work-wise, you look at like Hemingway, he only does a certain type of person. His character is always like the disgruntled man who's American but somehow in Europe. And like no one is angry at him for being like, well, why don't you write about Spanish people if you're in Spain? It's like, exactly. He didn't know it. So I'm just like creating what I know. And because Hong Kong is so small, because there's a generation of these mixed kids who are usually like second gen mixed or first gen mixed. But we've grown up in a Eurasian sort of environment where we don't feel like we're the odd one out. Like my fiance, he's half Japanese, half like Ashkenazi Jewish American. And he will tell me like he'll go to the synagogue, and when he was a kid, he was the Asian boy at the synagogue. And people would be like, what's a Japanese boy doing at temple? And he was like, no, I'm like as Jewish as I am Japanese. And in Hong Kong, you don't have that kind of experience being mixed because everyone's so mixed. But that brings on its own kind of like issues of you start to break down how mixed you are. And so like I'm really white passing. I have friends who are very Asian looking, and it becomes like the splitting of hairs of who's Asian enough, who's entitled to like claim Hong Konger as their identity becomes like a concept. So all these things are very personal to me, but they're not so unique that no one else gets it. And I think that's why people latch onto it, because people get it. And I make fun of like the expat community a lot. I get like sucked into the expat community a lot just because I look like an expat. And I like went to school with a lot of expats at international school, but I sort of make fun of it in the book. And then like, sorry, tangent, but the way I construct the book, it's not chronological, it's not alphabetical. I sort of take you starting with like Hong Kong history, And then we talk about like Hong Kong as an island, nature, things that go into like the animals and what was there. Then it goes into like work and women and how that's developed over time in Hong Kong. And then it goes into like childhood. And as it comes out of that, there's like a sort of flow to it. Do you read them in order? And then it gets to a point where it starts to satirize like mainly white people that come into Hong Kong and how they originally colonized it, but how there's a bit of entitlement to the white community. Like, speak to me in English. It's like, you're in Hong Kong. Like, come on. You're in China. So it starts by mocking, I would say, like that sort of expat, that classic entitled expat. But then it also goes into talking about what are expats entitled to do if we're going to police their behavior. Like, can they participate in a dragon boat race? Or is that appropriation? Like, at what level do you say you don't belong here and you shouldn't be engaging? And at what level is someone like innocently trying to be part of something and not trying to like profit off it? Or like you hear about white people like taking congee and being like, it's rice porridge. It's like, no. But so at what level are you allowed to engage in a culture? I get like with the Hong Konger Anthology, or the Hong Konger in general, I get a lot of people saying you shouldn't be doing this. It's like not yours. You're profiting off of like a country or like Hong Kong while it's suffering. This isn't good. And I think they're like, you're not from here. You don't get to do that. And yeah, I wasn't born here. I get that. But I think the reason I wasn't born here is kind of a big explainer as to the fact I am from here. And in the end, at the end of the day, I think I like give back enough and try to like funnel what I do read down to not just be like, but I do find it very interesting, this discussion everywhere, not just in Hong Kong. In America, it's huge. Like, do you belong or are you an other? And who gets to decide that?
Yeah. I mean, you have if I could just read in the foreword, you say, it's kind of a disclaimer, right? You say, I am and was acutely aware while creating this anthology that my viewpoint is not representative of all Hong Kongers. This anthology contains the perspective of a privileged, native English-speaking, international school-educated, white-passing, Eurasian sickly woman. I heavily contemplated representation in this book and questioned whether my voice was allowed to be so prevalent when it is not representative of the standard Hong Kong experience, whatever that is. However, this book was never meant to be a field guide to Hong Kong, to be the ambassador of Hong Kong culture, to be the tome which present to the world to cry, this is us. And so, I mean, I think you're very aware that there are 8 million people in Hong Kong that are not you, but
exactly.
But who is?
Exactly. I feel like as long as I'm trying and I know that I'm doing my best, I don't need to worry so much about scrutiny. And I think especially in this day and age, people are very quick to get angry and very quick to assume. And all I can do is try to pass stuff down, like give credit where it's due, but also not completely put myself down in the process. And I don't know, I think sometimes I'm super harsh on myself and other times I'm like, this is great and I'm having a great time and I'm not thinking. So I just have to be cognizant that I'm allowed to fluctuate as long as I come back to some grounded center where I'm not being an awful person.
Yeah. Well, someone told me that in the podcasting world, and I'm pretty sure it's true for any creator, is that you've made it when one, you can get an assistant, right? And two, you have haters, so.
Okay, I'm halfway there.
You're halfway there. So if you start getting hate comments, hey, yeah, you're making it as a creator, I guess.
Yeah. My mum likes to think of herself an assistant. She'll like come with me to things and be like, can I just watch? I'm like, yeah, you can watch. And the next thing I know, she's like giving out the wrong change at like a Christmas fair we're doing. Like, what are you doing now? That's not how much it costs.
Now, did I read that she has an art school, right? She kind of, and she dragged you along?
Yeah, I mean, I gladly went. Like, okay, so she was one of those like 90s women what does that mean? But she was like one of those women who was like a bit too conservative to be part of like the bra burning feminist movement, but was aware that she needed to have like her own financial independence. She wanted to work. She was going to be bored out of her brain. She like just didn't choose to like be a stay-at-home mom.
Sure.
But my dad also didn't choose to be a stay-at-home dad. So she was like, okay, I need to find a way to be around my kids and raise my kids without having to sacrifice my own career and stuff like that, which was really prickly in Hong Kong and everywhere at that time.
Sure.
Very few benefits. And she worked at PwC and was like a management consultant. And she left when I think she left when like she was pregnant with me or something. And when I was about 2, she thought, okay, I need to do something. She had like tried to start a business, but it hadn't really worked. And she didn't want to have like a cute little wife business that my dad sort of was like, that's cute. You do your thing. You sell jewelry in your living room or something. So she was like, okay, I want to like have a business that's scalable and that gives me something to like work for and earn and enjoy, but I don't want to never see my kids. And she really likes hobbies. My mom and I both we love a craft. We love like arts and crafts, knitting, sewing, cross-stitch, painting, stamp collecting, like all that stuff. So she was like, I should start a school where we just like do arts and crafts, because then the kids can come and like I'm babysitting them, but I'm at work. Because before, like there was nothing for us to do. I remember once we went to like a trampolining class at Hong Kong U because there was nothing else for a 2-year-old to do. So she started this like little classroom, and she had 2 kids already, me and my sister in there. So other kids, our friends joined. And then she was like, right, we're getting a bit too crowded in this room. Let's have 2 rooms. Oh, now these kids want to sing and dance. Let's have 3 rooms. One of them's now for performing arts. And it's grown into this very, very like lovely sort of environment where there are centers around Hong Kong now. And it's a bit more commercial because it's had to be to scale. But I've grown up there my whole life. Most of my friends I either met through there or met at school and then dragged them along. So we've all kind of grown up there. Like right now, one of my best friends from middle school, who I met when I was 9, she helped me on the book. Her name's Janice. She's in the acknowledgements. She helped me on the book. We were best friends when we were 9. We were in like a band together. She now works at Kids Gallery. I work part-time there. She works there. And it's just great. And Janice like embodies that spirit of the Kids Gallery kid who like went there, had a great time, now works there and sees these kids and is like, you guys don't understand how cool this place is. It's just, it makes me so happy to talk about it. And I think it's weird that I ended up having an artistic career, because the whole time my mum was like, she's very British. She's like, you can have a hobby, but do not do an art career. You need to support yourself. And so now it's like, I'm an artist, but I'm supporting myself. Yeah. And so I think she's really pleased that we've both been able to do things we love for work and support ourselves with that work. So yeah, she's definitely behind a lot of like, it's an enormous privilege to be her kid. Cause like, if you go to an art school every day after school for your whole childhood, you better come out with something handy. And I don't think I could have done this if it wasn't for like her raising me in an art school, but also like her giving me an iPad for Christmas. That was a big like important factor. But yeah, like that's when I think about privilege and stuff, it's not just the blanket stuff we talk about like race and gender or whatever. It's also like my mom really set me up well. And she's a big reason why I'm like here in so many ways, obviously.
But it wasn't forced. It wasn't like, oh, you have to do this. It was something for fun.
That's the thing. What like makes me really like curdle inside is when parents will like drag their kids over to me and be like, see, look what she did with her iPad. You have an iPad. Why aren't you doing this? And I'm like, no, don't tell them that. They're not going to want to do it. Because you have to like with most things, people aren't going to do stuff if they're told to do it. Like with masks, people don't want to wear masks because like, I'll do what I want. But if they wanted to, they would. It's the same with like forcing anything. Like if you force a kid to be a doctor and they don't want to do it, it's exactly the same forcing a kid to be an artist and they don't want to do it. And it comes back to like, if the enjoyment's not there, the art's not good. But yeah, she never, if anything, she was like, don't be an artist. I don't want to support you in your 40s. And I did it.
You did both. Yeah.
Take that, Mom. But yeah, I think she says she's proud. I'll believe her.
Well, should we talk a little bit about the art? I have a few that I want to mention, and I'd love to hear what your favorite covers are.
I'll get my book out.
So the one, and I didn't realize it was on the cover until after I picked it, but I really liked Portals.
Yeah.
And
I mean,
so it's Now, some of your covers are pretty straight,
Yeah.
from New Yorker. There you go. Yeah.
There we go.
Some are pretty straight from, the New Yorker has 6 doors on it and yours has 6 doors. But I think I like it because this is one of my little things whenever I go on a trip to a place, especially somewhere colonial with a little bit of history. I love taking pictures of doors and just seeing.
Oh, really?
I do, yeah. So, Quebec or, Taiwan, anywhere I go, I like to look at doors and take little pictures, especially if they're colorful. So this one jumped out at me.
Brilliant.
What went through your mind picking this cover, and why did you choose this one?
Honestly, this is a very popular cover, and I did something on my Instagram a while back being like, pick your favorite Hong Konger. And it was like a bracket. So you voted every day and it advanced. And Portals kept winning. And I was like, people are not liking the ones I spent ages on and really had meanings for. They're picking the one that I literally was like, doors. They're Chinese doors. Okay. Literally, that's all that went through my head. And people read into it a lot. Like, what does it mean? Some of the doors have Chinese on them.
I love that.
And people are like, well, what's the significance of the Chinese? I'm like, I don't know. I literally took photos of doors and then drew them. That's all that happened.
Yeah.
But then I was like, it's kind of hilarious that I drew, it's stupid of me that I drew these doors and didn't think to check what the Chinese said. What does it? I have no idea. And then I was like, well, that's why people say I'm not a real Hong Konger, because I didn't check. I don't know. I can't read it. So the poem is a haiku, which is basically a take on, that riddle where it's there are 2 guards at a door. One always tells the truth, one always lies. Do you know that riddle?
I've heard it, yeah.
Yeah. So I was like, okay, so assuming that there are 2 guards at the door, 2 signs at the door, and one lies and one tells the truth, it doesn't make any difference to you if you literally can't understand either of them or read either of them. To you, you're not even trying to engage with the guards. You're like, oh, door.
Yeah.
And that's a lot of kids in Hong Kong who grew up not learning Chinese well enough are like that. There's just so much that we don't even register. Because when you're when I'm in the US or the UK or any sort of English speaking country, you can hear stuff that other people are talking about on the train. And you're I didn't eavesdrop on people till I went to the UK and was like, I can eavesdrop because my Cantonese just wasn't good enough. And I do feel like I lose a lot of Hong Kong sort of chatter and absorb less of it because I just can't pick up on my surroundings. And so in the end, the print has become about that, even though I didn't need for it to. But
I like that, the cast iron is so...
the mailboxes. But I tried to do every quite religious ones, temple ones, quite extravagant ones. But then the blue one is actually from an apartment I used to live in Shengwan, with the mail always I feel like I was the only person who lived there. No one ever got their mail. So I would just put mail everywhere. But yeah.
Yeah, so I think it's a good cover for you to have on your cover. It's kind of like an entryway, the portal.
Yeah, I did think a lot about what to put on the cover because I was like, I don't want to design a separate separate Hong Konger for the cover, but I can't really use any of the current ones because they're part of a bigger piece. So I said, what if I just take the doors out? Because the doors are popular and people like them and it's colorful enough. And so it worked in the end.
Yeah. The other one or another one that I liked it's called Time Difference.
Yeah. Oh boy. Okay.
So that one gets a little deeper, right? We're getting into. So the original looks like it's. Well, you can explain the original. It's a doctor.
Yeah. So this came out of the pandemic. If you're reading along at home, it's page 55. I don't know if anyone's got the book, but yeah, it's a doctor. The original for the New Yorker is a doctor during the pandemic, and she's totally swamped. She's in the corridor of a ward. And she's saying goodnight to her children who are in bed with their dad about to go to sleep. And the gist is I think it came out, when did it come out? April 6th, 2020. It came out the beginning of the pandemic where doctors were just completely overstretched and had no warning and weren't used to it at the beginning. And it's a sad piece. And when I saw that, I thought of boarding school And when I went to boarding school, we did not have iPhones, but and we did not have like FaceTime. We had like a payphone.
Right.
God, I sound old. But it reminded me of boarding school. And this is actually the only Hong Konger that's not set in Hong Kong.
Hong Kong.
It's set in like a generic British boarding school. And you can see the kids are wearing uniforms. Someone's got like a hockey stick because that's very British.
Right.
And there's a kid from Hong Kong who people have told me looks like Harry Potter, which I kind of agree with, who's FaceTiming his parents at like, I'm pretty sure I made it. It's the million like person march that happened on like June 7th of 2019.
The yellow umbrella.
Yellow umbrella. It's that whole movement. And this is one of my more political pieces, but it's less about the politics of that and more about the feeling of being so isolated from your home and seeing it just, go up in flames, or just so much unrest and so much disagreement and conflict, and being a child, being unable to help, but also being so far away. And when I went to boarding school, nothing like crazy was happening in Hong Kong. I went like between 2006 and 2011. So besides like the financial crisis, nothing really happened. But
you can imagine what it would be like. Yeah.
And I felt real homesickness for the place, and like things were changing and I couldn't do anything about it or watch the change. And I'd come home every like summer and it would be different. And so that feeling is there, but it's heightened because there's actually like conflict now that you have to deal with, and your identity you have to deal with. And also no one around this character knows what's going on, because like people sometimes think Hong Kong's in Japan. Like they don't know what's really happening. So it sort of shows isolation, but also it's a family photo. It's like very clearly a mum, dad, and two kids, but there is that separation there.
Yeah, really like it. And then the next one is the one that we talked about a minute ago, is Water Break. I like this one.
Oh.
The original art is amazing. But it's not exactly, the pose is the same as the original.
Yeah.
But even the style is different, and of course the subject is different.
Yeah.
And you said this one is not your most popular one though, because it's kind of detached.
I'll let you
from
in on
your
a secret.
experience.
Not a single person has bought this one. Like most of them have been bought at least once. Not a single person has bought this one. No one's asked after it ever. So I'm very surprised that you like it. It's honestly, it came out 2 weeks after the New Yorker version of this came out 2 weeks after the New Yorker version of Time Difference. You can check the dates. So the dates on all the Hong Kongers are the same as the New Yorkers. And that's a way for you to like check back to see the original.
Right.
But yeah, this one like artistically was very different from what I normally do, because usually I will do more stuff with the Procreate app. Like I'll use something called clipping masks, which will let me basically like wash a whole layer in a color, and then I can put a layer underneath and the color will only show up on the layer underneath. I don't know if that makes any sense, but basically I use a lot of tech normally to make the art. With this one, it's all color pencil. It's entirely like by hand color pencil, which was ballsier for me because I'm not comfortable with that. I'm a lot more comfortable relying on the iPad to do a lot of my work for me. So this doesn't have very clean lines. It's all pencil really. And I wanted it to look like someone had done it in color pencil.
Yeah.
It really doesn't have a story behind it. I did like a little research. I spoke to this lady who was very reluctant to talk to me, and I did have to like use my friend who speaks better Cantonese to sort of cajole her. And there was a sense of like, she says that she was reluctant to talk to me because she thought I'd be another sort of white person who would take pity on her and have a weird concept about work. And there is this very different idea about work between like Western and Asian cultures, where Western people are like, work is these are huge generalizations. Take everything I say with a grain of salt. But there is a mentality that work is oppressive and there's exploitation involved. And that's very true. Like you look at like my alma mater, Columbia is having a massive union strike right now. But so there's a point to that. And I agree with that. But it gets to the point sometimes where work is always seen as negative and it's always seen as detrimental. Whereas there is a traditional, more conservative Chinese belief that work gives you joy and purpose, and there's meaning and pride and dignity to it. And she was concerned that I would whittle her experience down to being about like oppression, when she actually likes going out in the day and seeing her friends. And the break she's having isn't like, oh my God, it's awful out here. It's more just like taking a break, and then I'll go back and I'll be helpful and I'll clean up. And one of the questions we asked her was like, is like, you sound very positive, but what's the negative part of your experience? Like, what are the negatives of your experience? There must be some. And she just said, well, sometimes I get annoyed at nature because it makes more of a mess sometimes than people. And I was like, haha, yeah, I guess so. And so the poem's actually based on another poem. What I do sometimes is, because I parodied like the New Yorker, I was like, it'd be fun to parody some actual poems. So this one's a parody of an ancient Chinese poem. It's called Traveling Early to Shangshan. And it's basically like about a voyage, but I've adapted it. And I keep like some of the syntax, keep some of the structure, but now it's about this lady going to work. And you think that she's going to be like, these kids with their bottles and their pollution, but actually she's annoyed at like a tree for shedding leaves. And that's sort of the poem in the end.
Do you mind reading that to us?
Yeah, sure. Okay. So it goes, in the morning, she starts to move pre-alarm, traveling, thinking numbly of home. A tram dings an overturned bin, the moon still up on the edge of the mount. Footsteps warming the dew, leaves fell from hiking trails overnight. Bougainvillea bloomed and wilted, a straw-ended broom under fine stickiness on its handle. To sweep and sweat, nature's groundkeeper. I feel weird reading like my not rhyming ones. So normally when people ask me to read them, they're like, read one that rhymes. And I'm like, okay, let's go. So when I read the deep ones, I'm not actually used to reading them aloud because I feel like I had to compromise. I was like, I need fun ones for like people who don't do poetry, like ones that rhyme and you get it and it's fun and there's like a twist at the end.
Yeah.
But I have like those ones which are serious, and I'm one of those people that like deals with discomfort by like joking about stuff. So when things get deep and meaningful, I'm like, ooh, quite deep. But yeah, so that is one of my deeper ones.
Yeah, I mean, if you've been to Asia, you know this woman, right? If you've been anywhere and it does seem like very thankless work, and it's just like never ending.
Yeah.
But, my mother-in-law has that philosophy where, she's in her 60s and we're like, when are you going to retire? And she's like, why would I retire?
Same with my mom. She's like nearly 60 and she's like, I love my job. I'm like, okay. But it's weird because like, I feel like I can't work because I'm always going to be at risk of making myself sick again and having a relapse again with my autoimmune diseases. But I love working. I loved audit. I loved Excel spreadsheets. I did it partially to be like, must impress boss, but also because I was like, this is kind of fun. And so it's a weird thing to navigate, but it's like, I guess it's like eating chocolate. Like, just don't eat so much chocolate that you get sick. Like, just do stuff in moderation and you'll be fine. But I do think like the concept of work is getting torn apart right now because of like the Great Resignation, all that stuff. Mm-hmm. And so it was an interesting poem to write given the context, because that interview was about how different people look at work.
Yeah.
And how some people find it very rewarding and other people find it very exploitative. And you'd think like a custodian, like a street custodian, would find it exploitative, but actually she was like, no, there are my friends back there and I'm having a great day. Like, don't label me.
Yeah, no, being at home would be misery.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, she's like, I'm out and about. It's fine.
Do you have any poems or pictures that you really just? It doesn't have to be like it's the best, but just ones that you like.
I have one, but it's long, but it has a fun twist at the end. So I'm going to go for it because it's a popular print. This one's one of my like better selling prints.
Yeah.
So it's Hog Walker. It's on page 17. But basically, in this print, it's got all these natural Hong Kong wildlife. And Hong Kong's known as like a shiny city, but we've actually got a lot of like wildlife. If you go out to the New Territories, which is where I live, you'll like see a cow crossing the road and just be like, there goes a cow. Like my mum, we moved out here in the New Territories, like when it was still really, really jungly. Now it's a bit more developed. But my mum once thought she nearly hit a kid running across the road, and it turned out to be a monkey. She was like, oh my God, like a child just ran across the road. And we were like, and we got out of the car and it was a monkey. And we were like, oh my God, okay, it's not a naked child. But it's literally quite feral out there. So I thought it'd be fun to bring those animals, which are quite feral, into like Wan Chai, which is quite a developed area. Right. So there's a building that's blue and gray in Wan Chai, so I put it in there. Anyway, so this is the poem, and it lists all the animals. So when I read this to like kids and stuff, I get them to point to the animal as I name them to see if they can do all the names. So you can do that at home.
I'll try. I'll play along.
Okay. All right. So it goes, It seemed the perfect summer job to dally in the sun, to collect fees and tie up shoes and hit up the dog run. Miss Ma paid me 300 to leash up her mutt Drake, and Jaden Wong paid 500 to care for his pet snake. Twinkle Jung paid extra from her day job's till to get special treatment for her elderly spoonbill. Jerome lent me his gecko, Kyle lent his sow, and Farmer Gung from North Saikung gave his brooding cow. Rainbow lent her monkey, and Aaron Kwan his bat. Mason lent his pangolin, tortoise, and civet cat. The grasshopper and mongoose were both from Caroline, and Mr. Snowd from Borret Road lent his porcupine. So we all walked together, a parade of merry beasts. All could heel, and no one squealed at the rigid leash. We then came to the dog run, and so as not to smother, I unhooked all the leads to find that they'd all eat each other. So that's like the fun one I do with that's what I mean when they're like poems with a twist at the end. It's like, oh, they all ate each other.
Now this art, so the actual woman in this picture is almost identical to the New Yorker.
Yeah. So what I try to do is I always keep one element the same. So sometimes I go a bit too far away, like the Campbell's Troop one of the ballet school. That went like way off, but it was so meaningful to me, I kept it. Yeah. But usually it's a difficult balance because obviously I don't want to rip off the New Yorker to the point where I'm just like copying them. I don't want to get sued, and I wasn't planning on doing this like professionally. So now I'm like, oh, there's always that risk. But I always keep one element. So in this element, it's the woman, and like some of her leads and stuff go in similar directions. But then what I will normally do is I'll take the there's a part before I start drawing where I dissect the original, and I'm like, right, we'll keep the woman. Circle the horse. That's now a cow. Circle the dog. That's now this. Circle like the parrot. That's now a kite. Like I will sort of plot out what goes there instead, but I'll keep like a single element so you can be like, there's the parallel. So the woman's kept, but like some things I changed. The main thing I changed is her keys are gone, and her keys are gone because I've noticed in Hong Kong recently, like unless you live in an old building, no one has keys anymore. Huh. Keys and wallets are being completely like gotten rid of in Hong Kong. I just pay for everything with my phone. You can get into places scanning your phone now. There's like a hand scan on my friend's apartment block. There are no beat codes. There's no like key anymore. So I thought the key wouldn't be realistic. In Hong Kong, it's all on your phone now, or it's like biometrics. No keys. And so I'll try and do that. I'll try and like remove what doesn't make sense. And I'll try and be very deliberate about why I'm including what I'm including and why I'm removing what I've removed.
Now, are there little Easter eggs for locals only? Like sometimes you'll see something, like you'll throw in something that only people who live in Hong Kong would know, or...
I mean, with Day Off, with the domestic helper one, I definitely threw in the Jollibee because that's like from the Philippines and quite popular. I'm trying to think of like other things that Hong Kong people would know. I'm having a flip through.
But you honestly, might do it like, subconsciously.
I do it subconsciously. I'm not like thinking about it. I mean, there's one called Cupidity. And this bar is now closed. But in Chater House, which is in Central, it's like a shiny building. There's this whole floor that is entirely dedicated to Armani, like Giorgio Armani. It's super bougie. And there used to be a bar called like Armani Privé. And it had this massive pink balloon that you could see from the street on the balcony. And it was basically like where... I went there once when I was about 18 with some friends. We were all just like old enough to go. And we thought it was like the bar to go to because we had seen the pink balloon and saw like, you know, Turkish businessmen on Instagram there. So we were like, okay, that's where to go. And it was dead. And it was so uncool. And the party was happening like in Lang Kwai Fong, 5 minutes away. And it was just such a weird feeling to be in a place where it was desperately trying to be trendy and wasn't. Yeah. So when I did this version of the New Yorker cover, I was like, yeah, if you were a guy really trying to impress a girl, but you were just hopeless at it, you'd be like, yeah, we'll go to the Armani bar. And it's like, no one's there, it's empty. So I guess, I don't know, maybe that was just like the one night where it was like that and normally it was pumping, but it's closed now, so we'll never know. But I was like, yeah, if you know that if you go to that bar, on occasion, it could be totally empty and you're not impressing anyone.
That's a good way to put it.
But yeah, it is subliminal. A lot of like the things I do, I think it's just me assuming that everyone knew. And then someone will be like, oh, is that a Hong Kong thing? And I'm like, oh, yeah, it is. I didn't realize that was so subliminal. But yeah.
Now, do you have an idea who your audience is? Well, I guess you do shows a little bit.
Yeah. So it's weird because depending on what I create, it has value that might not match the audience I started with. So when I started, it was just the people on my Instagram. It was my friends, mainly in America, who were like, we don't care about Hong Kong. And like my friends from childhood who were from Hong Kong. So at first people were like, okay, cute, you can stop now. But when I started talking about it, like I went on Kyle Leung's What Kind of Asian Are You podcast, like I started garnering this group of like Gen Z and millennial Asians, all from like across the Asian diaspora in the US, in the UK, in Australia, in Hong Kong. And so that became my audience. But we're millennials, we're Gen Z, we're all in debt and we all don't want to pay stupid money for like massive prints. And I did a blog post recently on my website about how like the Hong Kong started and everything that happened month by month. And in around June, I was like, I need to print these to display in an exhibition. And so I decided to like do the high end thing and make a really lovely crisp print and make it limited series. And I was going to sell it for 8,000 Hong Kong dollars. I was really excited. I was like, oh my God, okay, I hope someone buys it. And I had a mailing list of people who said, when it's ready, let us know. So I emailed it out and I was like, they're ready. I've printed 5 to start with. They're $8,000 or like 8,888 or something like lucky. Lucky number. And I was like, go nuts. And I got an email back from someone saying, there's a mistake on your website. It says 8,888. Did you mean like 888? And I was like, no, it's definitely like almost $9,000. And she was like, oh, well, never mind then. And I didn't sell one for about 5 months or 4 months. And I thought, oh my God, I've just like shelled out all this money to print these things and frame these things. No one's buying them. What do I do? And then I have all these other friends, like Gen Z friends, who are like, can we buy it? Can we buy it? And I'm like, yeah, do you have $8,000? And they were like, well, no. So I had to alter my business model. And now like those big ones go for way more than 8,888 Hong Kong dollars. But I also sell smaller ones that you can just get off my website. And they're not signed, they're not limited series, but they're still great quality and they fit that demographic. And so trying to like, this is when like my business mind came in. I was like, okay, I need to like cater to the audience I have, but also tap into another audience that's willing to pay stupid amounts of money for art.
Yeah.
And so I've had to like strategize that, which is why I was like, I need to get into an exhibition. If I get into an exhibition, I'll meet people who are comfortable spending that much money on art. And it's like a foreign concept to them. And so I did that. And then with the book's audience is slightly different just because you don't need to invest that much in it. You just buy the book and you have all the prints. But what I tried to do with that is from the beginning, I said it'll come out in December just because I thought I could catch the Christmas crowd. And the book is generic enough that you can kind of give it to anyone who has a link to Hong Kong.
Yeah.
And that was a little strategic of me. I was like, I don't want to make it so specific that people are like, okay, I don't really want to hear about this random girl's like disease. Like it's fine. So I think I made it generic enough that you don't need to read the poems. You don't need to know anything about me. Just flip through and look at the pictures. Great. But then if you wanted to, there is that extra layer with the text. But then I think about like the way the project used to be with the book is I originally was going to interview a person for every single print. And that was super difficult to do just because I couldn't find an interviewee for every single print. And a lot of the interviews ended up becoming really, really intense to the point where I couldn't do it justice in like a page.
Yeah.
Or I ended up shouldering like I became like a counselor to stuff completely unrelated to the book and felt incredibly guilty because I didn't know if I was giving good advice. Should I give advice? Oh God, I'm giving advice. Like it became a huge project where I was like, I need to stop because I'm going to get myself into trouble if I keep like taking on this role. And I was worried for a while. I was like, well, if people aren't being interviewed for this book, no one's going to buy this book because the only reason people would buy it is if they were in it. And I was really concerned. I was like, no one's going to buy this if they're not in it. But it's done well enough, I think, with the art alone. And I'm actually doing something with a lot of the interviews I did in the future because they are good. And I don't want to just like people spent time giving me like their thoughts and stuff. So I want to do something with it. But yeah, tapping into who my audience is has been tricky. And it's been like an iterative process of thinking about what people can afford, what people are entitled to, what people would enjoy or pay for. But then at the same time, I think the unifying thing is it's people who like Hong Kong either from afar and think it's just a very interesting bubble of a place. Like, it's such a weird, like, it changes so quickly. Like, Hong Kong isn't just a place, it's like a place in a time. So I think people who are fascinated by Hong Kong, whether they're from it or just observe it, like it in some way.
Yeah, that's like me.
Yeah, exactly. And once like you get into the book and start unpacking stuff, you realize the issues in it aren't specific to Hong Kong. They're actually quite specific to like the world and the situations we face now about otherhood and like work and health and doing stuff for yourself versus your community. I think that's all in there, and that's all quite relevant.
Yeah. So speaking of the future, what's new? What's next for you? You're going to continue with the covers or do something new?
I don't want to be like, I'm doing 100 covers, because if I like put metrics on it, it stops being fun.
Sure.
So yeah, I'll like sit in front of the TV and I'll make covers still, and I'll post them on Instagram and whatever. But I don't do it because I'm like, Anthology 2 next year, get hyped, everyone. Like,
crank these out.
Yeah, I've got like 20 that aren't in the book, but I'm not in any rush to make Anthology 2. Honestly, I think people are like, okay, you did one, we're good now, thanks. I have plans to take the interviews I've done and use them to create fiction books for kids. Just because when I was a kid growing up in Hong Kong, there was no fiction for children about where I was from. Yeah. Like, I read Harriet the Spy. I read like a series of unfortunate events, Harry Potter. It's all in like England or America, and nothing's really that Hong Kong centric. And I had, in fact, it might be behind. Oh my God, I have it right here. Whoa, that wasn't planned. Okay, I read this. Look how racist and sexist this looks. This was the book I had about Hong Kong that I could go with. Girl Reporter, because you have to clarify it's a woman with a job. And then like Sampan Man with the hat. Oh my God. This like, look at the back. This is literally like something out of the 1950s. But these were the only things I could read about Hong Kong.
Yeah.
And there's an author in Hong Kong called Nuri Vitachi, and I used to read like his stuff. He's Sri Lankan from Hong Kong, but his stuff was like set in Singapore, which was the closest I could get to Hong. It's just, I don't think there's enough like stuff for kids in Hong Kong to read about themselves.
Yeah.
And representation is important. I think I'm like super fortunate to be dipping into this at a time where Asian representation is getting taken seriously and getting funded.
Yeah.
But I'm basically planning out a series of books for kids or like young adults that would be the covers. So every cover of a Hong Konger is the cover of the book, but it's actually like a story inside. Oh. And they're like crimey, but like not too crimey that a kid couldn't read them. And like, also I find that with young adult novels, it's very difficult to find young adult fiction that's not like really sexy or really angsty. Like, everyone's in a dystopian world and everyone's like angsty. Yeah. And I was like not a sexual kid, obviously. But like, I was like very uncomfortable with my sexuality until I was about like, last week. So I was like, I was like just not interested in Twilight. I was not interested in, Divergent or whatever these books were that were like kind of like hot and heavy and angsty. I just wanted to read like mystery books. So this is going to be geared towards like the reading level of a teenager, but for like the dorky kid that didn't have a sexual awakening until their 20s. So yeah, that's basically my next plan. And I've got other stuff coming through as well, but I haven't signed on them yet, so I don't know if I can talk about them. And I don't want to jinx.
So this is so this is kind of the path for you, though. You're moving towards your authorship, and the art will be part of it. Yeah,
exactly. I've always wanted to write, and I think that I'm better at it than I am at drawing. And the drawing's going to like dry up soon. That's not where a lot of my inspiration is. My inspiration is in the stories of the covers and the stories of like the poems. And so 2022, I'm setting myself up with a few projects that will help me segue into the storytelling while still doing art to some degree.
Well, great. Well, we'll have to have you back on the podcast when some of those come out. Yeah.
I'll be like your Christmas friend that comes in. Once a year, you'll be like, that's the end of the season. Oh God, Sophia's back. Oh my God, give her a mic. Oh, shut up.
No, I think it's fun. I think the audience, my listeners will really enjoy hearing you. I think it's a good time.
Cool.
Fun fact, we talked about Lowell High School a little bit. So Lemony Snicket was 1 year ahead of me at Lowell High School. And
no, you do not understand. I was, okay, I talk about like series of unfortunate events like I don't care. I cared so much. I had a cardboard cutout like a dry erase cardboard cutout of Count Olaf that you could like rub out and write things on. And I would leave him outside my door and write messages to my family like, don't come in, I'm doing a parody. I was so obsessed with Count Olaf that it wasn't okay. Like people were like, Sophia, you know he's not meant to be a heartthrob. I would draw like, I don't even know if you know that character. He's the bad guy. Yeah, okay. He had a tattoo of an eye on his ankle. I would draw an eye on my ankle and like an eye necklace. I was obsessed with, and then I found out Lemony Snicket's real name is Daniel Handler.
Yeah.
I thought I had like cracked the biggest mystery in the world because he's sneaky about it.
He's a little bit,
like,
yeah.
In some of the books, he doesn't even print it in the front where it has all the publishing stuff. I like found it out in like the 11th book. It said Daniel Handler. I was like, who's that? And I Googled him and I was like, oh my God, that's him. Yeah. That's him. But no one else around me cared. Sorry, I just went off on a total tangent. Love me some Lemony.
We were in a play together at Lowell High School. Yeah, he was a Harvey and I was Dr. Sanderson.
No. Oh my God. Is he as nice as he is in the book?
Oh, yeah. So I was in Cub Scouts with him. We went to school together for 12 years. Yeah. So we were in Cub Scouts together. And so we'd go on these camping trips and, you know, by the fireside, you tell stories.
Yeah.
And you can imagine his stories, even as an 11, 12-year-old kid, his stories were amazing. He's so entertaining.
Wait, he's got like a Cub Scout scene in book 10. Like in book 10, they go to like a campfire. Like,
I might be in that one.
You're in there. Oh my God, I'm reading that again.
Yeah, he wrote a book about Lowell High School. So there's a.
Oh, he did? What's that called?
Basic 8 or something.
Oh.
You know what? I'm gonna Google this so I sound smart.
Oh my God, this has become the Daniel Handler Appreciation Society.
They're a really nice family, and he really supports the local bookstores. And yeah, it's funny though with this novel about Lowell, there were some characters that we could recognize. You know,
there was Blurtis Blinn, who's oddly similar to you.
Well, luckily, I don't know if it's luckily, but I'm not close enough friends with him that I made it into any of the books.
I have this book. So like since I was like 12, I've been writing books that no one luckily gets to see. And one of them is a book I wrote when I was, in fact, I have it. I don't know if like I should go grab it. But anyway, it's like a book I wrote when I was 14 about my first year at boarding school. And it's just like the ramblings of a very angry 11-year-old. And it like it doxes everyone. And I read it sometimes and I think, oh my God, this would be so funny to read. But every single person who like bullied me in like boarding school or like I hated and they didn't even do anything. Like half these kids didn't even realize, like didn't even know who I was. And I'm like, this girl, like I'm not going to say her name.
Yeah,
but
your nemesis, but she didn't know who you were.
If that ever comes out, oh my God, I'm so sorry to everyone. I was like a hateful child. Oh well. But that's hilarious. Lemony Snicket. Wow.
Yeah, so it's called The Basic 8.
And
you could share it with your uncle. I'm sure he wasn't around at the same time as Daniel. But
he taught in like the 2000s there.
Yeah,
so
much later.
Oh my gosh.
But hey, Sophia Hotung, thank you so much for coming along and chatting, waking up early.
Yeah, time difference. Woo! Now I can start my day.
Yeah, I'm looking at a dark sky outside in San Francisco here.
Well, have a lovely evening. Thanks, Curtis.
Yeah, so if you want to know more about this book, you can find it at sophiahotung.com on Amazon, and you can just find it directly from her website as well. And so if they order it from you, you'll sign a little thing. And
yes, but I only ship locally. So I'm sorry. You have to be local. That's the caveat. Just because shipping's so expensive.
Oh, yeah. No, international is no joke.
Yeah.
But everyone out there, thank you for listening, and we hope you have a really happy new year. You can write to us at InfatuAsianPodcast@gmail.com and give us a follow over at The InfatuAsian Podcast over at Instagram. And Sophia, your Instagram is the same as your name.
It's my name. Yep.
Just the name. Sophia with the PH, right?
Yes. Hotung, Hotung.
Yeah. So look it up. Take a look at the prints on. There's a lot of them on Instagram, right? There's a good one.
There's a few. There's like, on my website, I think there are 75 for sale. And then I just like, on Instagram, I'll just post what I'm doing. So you'll see like half-baked work and stuff like that. What a sell. Like, sorry, you see good stuff too, not just like my crappy work in progress.
I saw a cool YouTube of you walking people through the process It was the ballet school where you were walking people
Oh.
through how do you actually do it? It was a time lapse of you doing it.
Yeah, because Procreate records it for you. So I was like,
Yeah.
oh, I can just talk about it while we do it. Anyways,
that was super
that's
fun.
a long video. You didn't have to watch the whole thing. I hope you didn't.
I don't think I
Okay.
did, but it was fun.
Good. Yeah.
But so everyone out there, have a happy new year. And on behalf of Sophia and myself, we hope you're all happy, healthy, and safe out there. We'll talk to you soon. Bye.
Bye.